Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into exactly how the massive engineering and construction sector is actually held accountable for its environmental footprint. When we think of giant infrastructure, skyscrapers, massive dams, sprawling highway networks, we often marvel at the engineering. But the sheer scale of these projects brings immense environmental risks. So today, we're looking at the exact frameworks used to track, measure, and report those risks. It's a massive question, right? We all know that for decades, corporate sustainability reports were basically just glossy marketing brochures. But to find the real answer to this question, we have to trace the journey of a single drop of a hazardous spill on a muddy construction site all the way to a standardized, undeniable data point on an investor's balance sheet. We are looking at the strict accounting standards that turn physical environmental realities into hard numbers. To get there, here's our roadmap. We'll cover the construction environmental footprint, introduce the SASB standards, look at tracking environmental non-compliance and what counts as a violation, discuss managing risks before construction, and wrap up with why this metric matters. Section 1. The construction environmental footprint. The heavy toll of global infrastructure. Infrastructure projects are incredible, driving economic and social development globally, but we absolutely cannot ignore their physical toll. Construction entities are out there performing massive clearing, grading, and excavation activities. And look, these pose a severe risk to the local environment and surrounding communities if they aren't properly managed. We're talking heavy machinery generating air emissions, massive natural resource consumption, and the constant, very real threat of harmful waste and hazardous chemicals seeping into the local ecosystem. Section 2. Introducing SASB standards, the Rosetta Stone of sustainability reporting. To bring some actual order to the chaos of unstandardized reporting, the industry relies on the SASB standards. Think of them as a universal language for sustainability accounting. Governed by the International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB, these standards categorize risks by specific industries. Here, we're looking directly at the industry standard for engineering and construction services. This ensures the metrics actually make sense for the folks pouring the concrete and laying the steel. Now, what is super interesting here is the timeline. These rigorous standards have an effective date for annual periods beginning on or after January 1, 2025. Sure, early adoption is permitted, but that 2025 date, that's a massive catalyst pushing companies worldwide toward urgent, standardized transparency. The clock is literally ticking on hiding behind vague sustainability claims. Section 3. Tracking environmental non-compliance. Zooming in on metric IFN 160A.1. Let's zero in and see how companies actually measure their true environmental compliance. This table breaks down the specific metric used to track when things go wrong on a site. Notice the category and unit columns? This demands a strict quantitative tally. It requires the absolute total number of incidents where a company fails to comply with environmental permits, standards, and regulations. It's not a narrative essay about how hard they tried. It is a hard, indisputable number of failures. Here is the crucial point. A company absolutely cannot hide behind the excuse that they weren't officially caught or fined. According to the standard, an incident of non-compliance must be disclosed regardless of whether it resulted in an enforcement action, like a fine or a warning letter, and frequency doesn't matter either. Whether it's a one-time accident, a continuous leak, or a non-continuous discharge, it all goes into the public record. Even just one single incident of non-compliance triggers this reporting requirement. The data has to encompass incidents governed by applicable jurisdictional statutory permits. So, if the permit says you can only disturb a certain amount of soil or use a specific volume of water, and you go over by a fraction, boom, that's an incident. The counting is absolute. Section 4. What counts as a violation? The concrete realities of environmental breaches. Let's ground this jargon in reality. What exactly is a construction firm tracking? Well, the standard is incredibly specific. When it says effluent limit exceedances, it essentially means a water discharge exceedance, like dumping more waste into a local river than your waste load allocation legally allows. It also mandates tracking visceral disasters like oil or hazardous substance spills. If a company pulls too much water from a local aquifer, a water withdrawal exceedance, that's a violation. If they violate wastewater pretreatment requirements or impact endangered species and land use, violations. This metric forces a company to measure their exact compliance with every single environmental permit they hold. And this right here reveals the true scope of accountability in modern construction. If you know this industry, you know that giant megafirms rely on armies of smaller subcontractors. Under this standard, companies must report noncompliance whether the spill was caused by their own direct entity employees or by subcontractors working under their direct supervision. You can no longer pass the buck down the chain. Section 5. Managing risks before construction. Preventing the spill before it happens. Of course, the goal of any good standard isn't just to count disasters after the fact, but to prevent them entirely. That brings us to the companion metric, IFN 168.2, focusing on risk management processes. Companies have to detail their specific due diligence across 3 phases. In project siting, they assess baseline environmental conditions and legal requirements. In design, they evaluate feasible, environmentally preferable alternatives and resource efficiency. And during actual construction, they implement waste management, conduct compliance training, and set up internal incident reporting mechanisms. To achieve this massive organizational oversight, construction firms frequently tap into established international codes and guidelines. They might use BREEAM or LEED for green building certification, or rely on the Equator Principles, IFC's performance standards, SII's Envision rating system, or ISO environmental standards. Building these directly into their design and construction phases is exactly how they manage those severe environmental risks from day one. Section 6. Why this metric matters. Accountability in the engineering and construction sector. So, we followed the data trail, we know how companies track water discharge exceedances, hazardous spills, and subcontracting errors. But why does tracking this actually matter to the financial world? Well, failing to comply with environmental regulations doesn't just harm the earth, it hits the company's bottom line incredibly hard. Environmental pushback and violations lead to costly fines, massive remediation expenses to clean up a spill, and severe project delays. In extreme cases, a bad environmental record leads to long-term reputational damage that literally limits a firm's ability to win future contracts. This quote directly from the SASB standard really hits the nail on the head. By assessing environmental considerations before project initiation, engineering and construction entities may be prepared to mitigate potential environmental issues and the associated financial risks. It highlights the ultimate philosophy here: what gets measured gets managed. By tracking these quantitative metrics of failure and pairing them with qualitative risk management, environmental stewardship turns into a distinct competitive advantage. The firms that can prove they run clean, compliant sites are the ones that are going to win the bids of the future. Next time you see a massive new skyscraper going up, ask yourself, what is the true cost of its construction, and who is actually keeping score? Because, as we've seen in this explainer, behind every single steel beam hoisted and every yard of concrete poured, there is an incredibly strict data trail holding builders accountable for every drop of water and inch of earth they impact. Thanks for joining me as we dug into the real metrics of environmental accountability. Keep looking behind the numbers, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.